You're listening to Mom and Doc Talk, where we talk all things healing pans and pandas with an emphasis on homeopathy.
Hi, I'm Jody, the mom.
And I'm Dr. Bar the Doc, and this is Mom and Doc Talk, where we talk all things healing pans and pandas with a special emphasis on homeopathy. And Jody, I don't know about you, but I'm super excited for our guests that we have today. These are people who are near and dear to our heart for so many reasons. And I'm going to read your bios just to give people an introduction. But as I was just telling you before we got started, I don't think your bios actually give credit to the work that you guys do. So I'm probably going to embellish and add a couple of things in there. And hopefully you're okay with that. So we have Amelia, who is a 12-year-old active neurodivergent kid who loves mountain biking and horseback riding. She spends most of her time outside and or with animals and her friends. She is also just a firecracker. She is an entrepreneur. This kid has already started a couple of different businesses. She is a leader within the Pans and Pandas community for children. She has led various different conversations to help kids connect with each other. She is just, she's an exceptional young woman, and I'm so excited to have her here. And I'll tell you that it's no surprise that she is our first and youngest interviewee or guest for the podcast, because this is a kid who, from the very beginning, when I met her, she was 7.5, 8 years old, has participated in her own recovery. So she is just a strong person. And I'm sorry I made you cry. Ashley is Amelia's mom, also neurodivergent and also active outside and with animals. Ashley is a board certified behavioral analyst, a BCBA, certified regular and special education teacher, background in psychology. She owns her own business supporting neurodiverse families and recently started coursework in nutrition, functional blood chemistry, and GI mapping to add that to her ways that she can help support families and other humans. Ashley's also one of our clients and uses homeopathy and other lifestyle factors to support health and wellness, and also doesn't give herself enough credit for the work that she does in the community. She is a bright light within our group when she understandably takes breaks from time to time because things are going so well that you want to take a bit of a break occasionally from the Pandas community, but does show up and just is that bright beacon of light. And when the people in the group and the community really seem to need it, she has raised a ton of money for supporting the Pans and Pandas community and helping with research and other various things. So this is just really a dynamic duo of people who are here and show up and do the work and support the community that they're part of. So thank you so much for your willingness to join us for this podcast.
Thank you. Those were like the best bios ever. You're writing them from now on.
That'll be my side gig. I'll just write bios for people who don't give themselves enough credit for things.
There you go, because you don't have enough to do.
Well, let's go ahead and just get started. What we'd like to, before we go into like any specific questions, we always just like to give people the opportunity to share a little bit about their story and tell our listeners, how did Pans really first show up in your life? Just tell us your story.
You want to start or you want me to start? Are you sure? Because, okay. Okay, so how did it show up? So this kiddo, she is a firecracker, always has been a firecracker. Apple did not fall far from the tree. So it was kind of hard because, like everyone talks about like the falling over the cliff point or whatever. So like for us, that did not happen until she was probably 6 or 7. And it was after like a series of a lot of bad things. There was like bullying. We had a lot of loss, like kindergarten started. There were just all of these things. But from the time she was born, she had a lot of ear infections. She had a lot of upper respiratory stuff going on. So she was on and off steroids. She was on and off antibiotics for like a long time. And every time she would have one of those things, she would like fight people, which she's always a firecracker, but she is not like a mean kid at all. Still isn't, like, so super out of character, but it was like these one-off things. And so even as a behavior analyst, like I was not putting these things all together until she really did just like crash and burn. I mean, it was bad when it happened. So she's always been more. She is neurodivergent, but so are her dad and I. So it kind of fit. And we just accommodate, and our life accommodates that. So I think that's a huge piece of it. But when she did have her huge thing, it was following a strep infection. But again, we had lost a house and a house like wildfires down in Tennessee. So it was not our main house, but like it was still a traumatic thing. We had also had, like I said, a lot of deaths in the family, unfortunately, kindergarten bullying. And it started with like frequent urination, I think, is the thing that it started with. And it was like, we were driving to Tennessee, 10-hour drive, and every like 2 to 3 minutes she was flipping out that she had to go to the bathroom. And then we got there, and she like wouldn't, she literally had to be touching me, which was a problem because I'm sitting in the front, she's sitting in the back. Even in a hotel room, like she needed me to sleep in the bed with her, even though it was like a couple feet away. And then like panic attacks started, and then the rages started. And at one point there was probably like a 4 to 6 month time frame where we couldn't be in the car without 2 adults, because she would like try to attack the driver, or she would throw things, or she would be trying to jump out of a car going 70 miles an hour. So we were able to get into like a PANS and PANDAS specialist like super quick. Like from the time I realized what was happening to when I called, it was like less than a week, which is like unheard of. Yeah. So like really there was like a cancellation. It was right before the holidays. So people were traveling and weren't taking these like canceled appointments. I was like, you tell me when or where, we will be there. So that day she also had a stomach bug, which was horrible, because then we went and got blood work, and it was like her blood was so thick, it was so bad. But they put her on antibiotics, they put her on steroids, they put her on like a ton of different supplements, changed the diet, like no dairy, no gluten, no dyes, like all those things. And basically like it was very validating, because he did say like, this is not you, like we're gonna fix this, it's gonna be okay, like you're not a bad kid, you're not bad parents. I sat there and cried. And so she was like a totally different kid from like within 24 hours of that first dose of antibiotics. So for us, that is the route that we went first. I didn't even know about homeopathy. And we did that cycle on and off of all of these different things, and adding things and removing things, and antifungals and antivirals and all of these things for like a year and a half. And then it kind of hit the fan, because there was like a rental agreement issue, and so they closed, and I was like freaked out, because I was like, what are we gonna do without antibiotics and steroids? Like we can't. And then I was like, we can't live like this is crazy. I have no idea how I found you, because we've talked about this before. I used to think you were like you spoke at a conference that I was at, but apparently that was in my head. I don't know. So I must have just been like late night Googling, found you somehow, and it made sense. Like go for this, like
sitting on the couch crying, and then you found it.
Yes. Sitting on the couch crying, and then I found it. So, it made sense to go for the root cause instead of all these band-aids that we had been putting on it. And she wasn't improving. We were just managing symptoms, really. Like it was not getting better. Like every time she was exposed to germs, it was a problem. She was kicked out of multiple daycares and preschools. And, eventually she was pulled from school altogether. But I think we're going to get to that. But what do you have to add? How did it feel to you for it to start?
Just like my brain was basically being attacked. So like I didn't have control over my body or anything I was saying. So like, and then like whenever I would freak out, like I wouldn't remember any of it. So like one time I like flipped out and like tore the house apart, and like I came out of it and I was like, what happened to the house? And then it was like my parents got sad because like I couldn't remember any of it. So I couldn't like stop it if I couldn't have remembered it. So it was like that was probably the biggest struggle for me, is not remembering any of it in the beginning, and then not being able to like fix it because I don't remember what I was doing.
Well, it's got to be so scary for you and your parents when like this scary thing was just happening, and then you stop and then don't even recognize that it had been happening. That's like frustrating and sad and scary and like all of the things together. I have one question for you, Amelia, from what you just shared. So from what you guys have, like what a lot of people have, right? Where it is not like 100% like the overnight onset. There was like a pretty clear big shift, but like looking back, it was building up over time, right?
Yeah.
And so so really in retrospect, you would probably say you didn't have that overnight onset that a lot of people characterize. And we know from some studies that there's only about 40% of kids truly have like the overnight, everything's fine, everything is horrible, sort of onset. I'm curious for you, Amelia, and if you don't remember, because it's been a while, totally fine. But I'm curious if you felt a really specific change at that time when it went from like building to like it had really tipped over. Or did it not really register to you?
I like sort of remember it. So like I remember having like horrible ear infections all the time, and I feel like my mom said like that's kind of like where it started.
Mm-hmm.
And like I remember like that not being like as bad, and then it was like really bad, and then I'd start having like these more symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like weird because like I felt like something was like different because it wasn't the same as before. Like before, it would just be like an ear infection and like normal symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
but then it started turning into like more like rage and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I could like kind of like notice that something had changed, but like I wasn't really sure what happened. So
And what about school? How did that impact you as far as going to school? Because there was a chunk of time there where y'all were doing, other treatments, and then even once you got into homeopathy, how did things go with school with all of that?
it was just so like I was always getting in trouble because like I was always doing something. Like I was either like barricading myself under my desk because I didn't want to like leave and get on the bus, or like I would be getting into fights at school. So like I feel like when I was in school, I was never really like getting the education because I was always just sitting in the principal's office, or I was sitting under my desk screaming, or I was like getting dragged onto the bus because I wouldn't get on the bus. So it's like I feel like school was kind of just like jail, sort of in a way. Like I wasn't learning anything. I was just being yelled at and like not learning anything. So it was like sort of scary and traumatizing. So
Yeah.
It must have been so important for you to hear that doctor that you got so lucky that you figured it out right away and got in so quickly. It must have been so important for both of you to hear you're not a bad kid and you're not bad parents, because especially with everything that you went through, where school felt like jail and you just kept being yelled at, like you must have had some thoughts that like, am I just a bad kid?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was so the bullying happened in the public school that she was in at the time, and we had already questioned whether or not we were going to send her to the district because it's not the greatest district in the area, but we thought we could get away with like elementary school, and that kind of forced our hand. So we pulled her from there and put her into a very small like Christian school, who I like disclosed everything to. I was like, this is the bullying that has happened. These are the behavioral issues that happened. This is what we think is going on, but we're working on getting it addressed. And they were like, we can handle it. So it was like, how many kids do you have in your class? Like 10 tops in her class. And they were super fantastic. And like she said, she spent most of her time in the principal's office, but usually that's because she would like koala onto this principal, and the principal just let her hang, literally. And so the principal would text me and be like, hey, like Amelia's with me again today. I don't mind, just wanting you to know, like she's having a really rough day, and like she can't be in the class. She can't go outside. She can't go to lunch. She can't, and a lot of that is like, we then later learned that she was neurodivergent, which was kind of hidden under the pans and pandas stuff.
Mhm.
And that's why she wasn't diagnosed, until much later. And so she's probably like massively overstimulated, like even in a small environment. I do think there was mold in that building, which was another piece. So I mean, they did their best, and they were super supportive and tried to help. But like, if a kid's barricading themselves under a desk, like I'm not paying so much money a month for a small private school for
Right.
her to like hang in the principal's office all day.
Right.
So eventually, what did we end up doing?
Then we went like
You don't have to say that.
midway through first grade.
Yeah.
We switched to an online cyber school.
Yeah.
And then I did that for 6 years about.
Mhm.
And then that was good because like I was online, so I didn't have to go. And then there was like optional field trips. So like sometimes like once or twice a year we'd meet up and there was like end of the year picnic stuff. So like I could go to that if I wanted to. But all of like the workload was way less than a normal school. And it was like a good environment. And then eventually we ended up just going to homeschool at my barn. Because once we hit like middle school, the workload got like way more.
Mhm.
So I was just like on my computer like 8 a.m. to like 5 p.m.
It was too
So
much. Yeah, too much. And now we're just doing traditional homeschooling here. And we have like a homeschooling community. So like and she does mountain biking and horseback riding and all that. So like she's super active and super social and talks with her friends constantly and everything, but probably none of us really want her ever to go back to a traditional school situation.
You have to find what fits right for you, right? And so I'm curious if you had any of the cognitive regressions that tend to come with PANS pandas. So like the difficulties in reading comprehension and math that a lot of kids have. Do you
yeah,
remember if you're doing that?
I like so like I was first grade, like it was when I
Kindergarten, first
first
grade.
started
Mhm.
to like notice that I would come home and like you would not even like be able to read anything I wrote. And like I
Mhm.
would have been able like before that I was able to write something and then like people understand what it meant. Obviously I was in like kindergarten, so it wasn't perfect, but it was very like you could barely tell what the words were. So
Her name would be like this huge A, and then you have to like find the M somewhere on the page. Like she couldn't spatially like organize things, and just her motor planning was gone. And so they're writing, and then what else? Reading.
yeah, reading like I couldn't focus on the words or like they would look like it was like moving. So like I couldn't focus and read like a line or I'd just keep reading the same thing.
Yeah.
And then math, I wasn't really doing much of it, but like it was hard to like remember like the order of like numbers and stuff like that, or like the order of like the rainbow. So
That's
it's like
math though. That's early stage math. So
mhm.
yeah. And
Yeah,
that's
so
important for people to understand too, because like some kids are going to have onset much younger than you. And so they're not going to lose the ability to figure out 4 + 4 = 8. They're going to like lose the ability to recognize numbers or to write numbers, or like you said, to keep them in the right order.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I take a lot of pictures and videos. I just do. And my husband doesn't generally, but at the time that this happened, I had a huge caseload. And so I was gone a lot of nights, or like I wouldn't get home till like 8 or 9. So like they would be sitting there reading and he would record her like reading, Dr. Seuss or whatever, which not easy stuff to read, but she was reading it. And
Mhm.
then the next night I remember like I was sitting in a meeting for work, and my husband's texting me this video and he was like, she can't even read this page, like, and she was like stumbling across, like it was, and it was like made me nauseous, like my stomach dropped. I was like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
just such a huge clear regression of skills.
Yeah.
That's tough. Amelia, I'm curious what happened, what was going on with your friends around this time, like the time of your onset and when you were really struggling. Did things change with your friendships that
So
you
like
had?
I had one friend and like she was like bullying people all the time and we would like I feel like we got in trouble like a lot because like I would just like follow whatever she did or she would follow whatever I did, so then we both were just doing bad things. So like I didn't realize at the time that like we were like it was what we were doing was being bad or whatever. So like we were just getting in trouble all the time, but that was like the only friendship I had then because I would always be attacking people or something. So
Yeah, and had a lot of like the rejection sensitivity dysphoria is what I know it as. And so like anytime someone like didn't agree with her, or like it was like you're not invited to my birthday party like stuff, but like times 1,000 with her, like everything was that, regardless of what it was, like even if it wasn't directed at her, like she took it that way and responded. And she is not a flight, she is a fight. And so that's what was happening. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then she did have other friends and like cousins and stuff like that, but we had always been very open with people like about what was going on. And if you knew her before the huge fall off the cliff thing, like it was super obvious. Like this was not normal Amelia stuff at all. So like we talked about it a lot. I mean, in my job, like if I had clients or like heard about kids, even like in schools and daycares and things, I'd be like, you need to talk to someone about that because this is not like the norm, like don't just accept like, oh, it's behavioral. No, like dig, advocate for yourself, and so like we very much have always like been very open about it and very communicative about what's going on.
Yeah.
So I think that helped a lot. We weren't hiding.
Yeah. That's one thing I've always admired about your relationship, as your mother-daughter relationship, is that you guys are very open and very communicative. And I think that that's part of why it was so easy for you, Amelia, to participate in your care upfront from the very beginning. So speaking of your care, you guys shared that homeopathy was something that you sort of stumbled into after everything else was like just giving you like holding you steady, but not really seeing improvement. Something stopped, like, things, we weren't getting better and you weren't becoming more resilient in the face of exposures and illnesses and all of that. And it was through, as Amelia said, through crying on the couch one night that you stumbled on us, is how you think you found out about homeopathy. So I'm curious, what did you think about it when you first started? Because it's a whole different way of thinking about health and healing than the conventional or even functional side of things. So I'm curious what you thought about it when you first got started.
I wasn't really thinking much about it, but like based off of what I heard, I was like, why would I take sugar? Because I knew sugar was like, I was like, why would I be like directly eating something that was making it worse? And then I was like, I was confused because like, aren't these things like poisonous? So I was like confused why I was like having two things that could like both be bad for me potentially.
Mhm.
So like I really just tried like not to think about it and just give it a try because like I was very confused about it. But I'm definitely glad I tried it because it definitely helped a lot. So
Yeah.
So it actually made sense to me when I read about it. I was like, duh, like it was the root cause type stuff, like the susceptibility. She is susceptible to this because not everyone has these responses when they're exposed to germs or strep or whatever, like stress and trauma and things like that. Like, so like it did make sense to me. And I think part of that is, because in what I do is like, I'm always looking for kind of the trigger sort of, and like, but why? Like, what were the foundations that were laid that allowed that trigger, that spark to ignite essentially? And so like, to me, that is very similar to what homeopathy does, is it's trying to figure out like, why are you foundationally susceptible to something, like, or not even why, but just fix that susceptibility, and like not necessarily needing all of the answers. And I think that my neurodivergence allows me to be okay with that. As like, sure, let's dive in. Let's see how this works, because the other stuff's not working. So like, what's this going to hurt, And so I was all in, and luckily, like, Amelia does have a dad and we are together, and he's not a talker, so you'll probably never see him on here. But he is super, super, super supportive of pretty much anything that pops into my brain. If I'm totally off the wall, he will call me out on it. But like, he in general is just very supportive and is like, if you think this is what we need to do, then let's figure it out. Like, we'll do it. So he was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but game on, let's go.
That's awesome. So I'm curious from both of you, from your journey in homeopathy, what did you love the most about homeopathy and what did you hate the most about homeopathy?
I think like the best part was I have like an instant reaction. So like when I first took my first dose, I was like, wow, like I actually like feel better, and like it changed, like my brain felt like more clear, so like I could like read things better and notice more things. And it was like really good because then I could like have more conversations with people and feel like less different. But then the worst part was probably like the aggravations, because that like it's a good sign, but it also like is like a mess when it happens. So that was like my like the worst part, because like when it first happened, we were like freaking out because we had been like doing really good, and then it was like we just hit a wall and then went backwards a little. But we actually then we learned that it worked, so that was confusing, but that's probably like my least favorite part of it.
Well, and the reality is, if you don't mind me jumping in here, that you didn't always aggravate, right?
No.
And so, and that can happen because depending on how strong your vital force is, and whether it's really strong but misdirected, or if it's not that strong and gets stronger, you can change the way that you respond to remedies, right? So you can go from not aggravating to aggravating because you're just stronger and more sensitive to things. Or you can go the other direction, which is obviously the preference, but at the same time, like having a really good, strong response is a really positive thing, because then it means you don't need to take something every single day. You just need a nudge, right? So I'm sure it was really, really hard. I don't love to see when people go from not being aggravators to starting to aggravate. But I also accept that it happens, and I see that usually that means that we're reaching like a turning point in healing too, even if it's becomes a little bit more challenging while we figure it out.
Yeah. And I do think that was a big turning point for her, for sure, because the way we dosed changed and she started needing less, mostly by force, because her body was I don't know if rejecting it's the right way, but like was telling us like that's too much. And so it really did change the way like you were treating her. And so, like that was a big deal. I agree. I think the best part is that she is a fast responder. And I have said this in the group for years that if she wasn't a fast responder, or if she was instantly an aggravator, I don't know that would have totally changed our journey, because we're not the most patient humans. So if we had to wait to see that response, like I think that would have been really hard for all of us. Like we needed, and families that are in this, they need, like we need to see hope, that this can be fixed, and life can be good again. And so, like I think that was a huge deal. And she's right, like within 15 minutes of taking her very first dose, she went to her cousin's pool party, which is 10 minutes from our house, not even. And she's laughing, saying, I remember that. She went from being this kid who was like stuck to my side, not typical of her though, to literally like we pulled in the driveway. She jumped out of the car, like threw her towel at us and was like, see ya. I mean, her dad looked at each other like you don't need me to walk over there. You're not going to awkwardly stand here for like 2 hours and then be mad that we're leaving because you're ready to go play. Like it was huge. Like it was really cool to see that. The aggravations definitely are scary. Or they can be, but I will say, like, your practice is really great at handling that. And so like anytime we came up against that, like we figured it out, and we always moved forward in a better way anyway. So it did always end up being a good thing, even though it was really scary at the time.
And I just wanted to throw in here for anybody who might be listening to this for the first time and hearing about aggravations for the first time, that one, they are not the most common response to remedies. Most people don't aggravate. And two, there are ways to mitigate aggravations to reduce them so that they're as minimal as possible, or completely eliminated. And so, and that's what we did, is we worked together to figure out the minimum effective dose. That's what we're always looking for in homeopathy, is the minimum effective dose. And if we get too much, then we get a little bit more of that primary action, which looks very much like what you're experiencing. And so it sort of adds together as this like double whammy of things. So
I have to put mom input in here. But if your kid is an aggravator, Ashley, was the aggravations and Amelia both, the aggravations worth getting to where you are today?
Oh gosh, yeah.
I feel like we have to say that, because so many moms fear aggravations and they're afraid to start. But even myself, having a severe or a pretty intense aggravator, still 100% worth every single moment we spent in an aggravation to get to where we are today.
Yeah, I think honestly, the very few times that she didn't have a response was actually more aggravating to me, because I was like, like I felt like it was like, I mean, it's another data point, but to me, I was like, I want action, like I want a response. And so it was annoying to me when she didn't respond, which I honestly think that maybe only happened like once. Like it was very uncommon. And the aggravation, same thing. Like I don't think she aggravated once we realized like that's what was happening. And she was actually pretty easy to figure out. Like she would need like a double diluted drop dose like every few days. And it was like, what? Crazy stuff. So yeah.
So I would love to hear more about what your life is like now for you guys as you've been going through healing with homeopathy. You've been at this a while and you are, I mean, how far along would you say you are? I mean, I know we're not 100%, but like, where do you think we're at?
Maybe like 70, 75, something like that.
I would say 95. I mean, I would say
I would have put more 90 to 95, but you know, you're the one that's living it, Amelia. So so regardless, you're doing a lot better than you were. Still little things that need managing here and there and that you need some support with, but compared to what things were before, substantially less. So what's life like now?
It's a lot better. Like I've been able to have sleepovers. Like before I would never, even if it was at my house, like I wouldn't do sleepovers that much. But like now, like one day I went to like way with my friend like all day and then spent the night at their house. And I did have a panic attack, but I was able to like pull myself back together and get a dose and all that. And yeah, I've been able to go out with my friends and like do a lot of things without my parents. So, but so I get to go out more and do things, and then like especially like food wise, like I've been able to eat like more sugar and like ice cream and stuff like that. So it's like all around better. So
yeah, it's life changing, like for real, life changing. I mean, I might cry because like I mean, we went from a kid who was trying to jump out of cars and like we were hiding knives and she couldn't go to school and couldn't have like you know anywhere near typical social interactions and like was constantly telling us that her brain was a computer that she couldn't control, and our life was consumed by pandas. Like it was like that's what I researched it at night, like we lived it during the day, like I mean it literally was everything we did. We had a support group that she started and ran for years for kids with pans and pandas, and we did that two or three times a week for a while, like for years, and like wanted to hold that space for other kids so that they didn't think that they were alone, and that they could have conversations or not, like whatever. So it literally was our life for a really long time, and it's not anymore, so that's great. I mean, like she said, we still are careful with what we eat, and I still have a lot of food issues, so we are gluten free, but like we can eat, we can go out and get gluten-free pizza, and that can be fine. We don't do it every day because that would be an issue, but like, in moderation, we can not have to be super crazy about diets and things like that. The social piece is huge. I mean, typical tween girls right there. There's the drama, and she handles it really, really well. I mean, we talk a lot about it, and we, problem solve and whatever. But I also think homeopathy has helped her be more in tune with herself. And so she's really good about setting boundaries for herself and knowing how she feels and how things make her feel, and that she's not okay with that. So she will set those boundaries and is okay with holding them. So she's a phenomenal self-advocate, even to us, like, I mean, so I believe that it's part personality for sure, and, part how she was raised. But a really big chunk of that is that homeopathy is really validating, because literally like the appointments, when you're on an appointment, it might be like weird questions that like a regular doctor's never going to ask you, like, does it feel better when you're outside, like, or, like whatever, does your headache feel squeezing or stabbing, like, who cares, take a Tylenol, like, so it's a really different way of coming at wellness, really. And I think that has really helped form her, like, as a human. So, and our relationship, because we have obviously gone through all of this together and navigated this with you guys. And I mean, it's a big deal. And so life now feels pretty darn normal most days, you know, and when it doesn't, she takes a dose and we continue on.
Well, Ashley, I'm going to throw in an extra question focusing on you, because you shared in your bio that you are also somebody who uses homeopathy for your own healing journey. And a lot of parents do choose to use homeopathy for themselves, sometimes of their own accord, and sometimes because honestly, their provider will recommend it, because the reality is that parents, as I like to say, parents are, and mothers in particular, are the nervous system of the family. And so sometimes we really have to heal mom who has dealt with the trauma of being a PANS parent in order for their kiddo to be able to fully and completely heal too. And so I'm curious if there's anything that you would be willing to share about your own journey with using homeopathy and your own experience.
Yeah. So I aggravated on my very first remedy. It was actually hilarious because it basically gave me PMS symptoms, like massively. I was like craving foods. I was crying about nothing. I was like super angry about things. I was like, this is nuts. Like, what is happening? And so, you know, like whatever, we fixed that. I think I actually switched to a different remedy altogether. But that was really funny. And it was actually a really good learning experience for me, because it was like, oh, that's what happens to her, you know, like, wow. And I was out of control, and I am an adult like, that's supposedly able to self-regulate and like handle themselves, and I was not. So that was a really interesting thing. I really started I think because of the trauma, but also like I have thyroid issues, and so that was like a really big concern. So thyroid issues, all of my gluten issues, and just other food sensitivities and things like that. So those were the reasons that I started. And with my thyroid stuff, it has helped significantly. Like the doctors are kind of stumped, the conventional med doctors that track me. They're like, your blood work says this, but your ultrasound says this, but then you're not symptomatic, you know, like, and so it's really interesting to see like how that has happened. It has helped significantly with my food sensitivities. I still don't do gluten, but just like same with Amelia, that I can have things now as long as I don't overdo it, basically. So I'm not going to have like ice cream and then like gluten-free cupcakes and then like pizza for dinner, because then I'm going to have issues. But panic attacks, brain fog, joint pain, fatigue, you know, irritability, the thyroid stuff, imposter syndrome was a really big one. Those are all things. Allergies, that's another huge one. She's actually not on allergy meds anymore, and she's not on acid reducer at all anymore. At all.
This is news to me. You haven't even shared this with me yet. Hooray!
No, I know. So like she's not, it's crazy. Like it's crazy. So it just kind of like brings your body back into balance. Like it's you listening to your body and following those symptoms and giving it what it needs to nudge it back into the right spot, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it feels like. So it is nice. And like I said, the appointments are not frustrating, where conventional medicine, at least in my experience, are very frustrating, because you feel like you're banging your head against the wall and like no one's listening. And that's not the case. Like with homeopathy, like you have these appointments and you're having a conversation where someone's actually listening to you, and taking what you're saying seriously in a non-judgmental way, and trying to figure it out, like collaborating with you on things. So like that is huge. People want to feel heard. So I love homeopathy. I have a whole closet full of remedies. Not certified at all in any of this, but like people who know me, like if they're having an issue, I'm like, hey, you know, like take some rust dogs if it feels better when you're up and moving eventually, or take some bryonia if it's better at rest, or, you know, like whatever. Like I helped my my one cousin had really bad psoriasis and actually got rid of it. Like we figured out a remedy that worked for them, and it was gone. Like horrible plaque psoriasis, gone. You know, for like $7 for the the thing, like it's crazy. Like my mom takes Ruta for like her arthritis stuff, and
Mhm.
because it works amazing for her, and she only takes a dose like every like month or so, and
Mhm.
she feels fine for another month or two.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so like we very much use it in our everyday life. Amelia doesn't get to have any of that because she's on her constitutional remedy, but
Someday though.
doesn't
Someday.
need it though right now, because
Yeah.
usually when anything pops up for her, she takes a dose and she's good.
Mhm.
So yeah, we homeopathy is such it scares me that it's going to go away. I hope that that does not happen, because I think that I know that it helps people. Like we've lived it. Um, so I
Yeah.
mean, we do.
Well, and I love that you shared how, like, as somebody who without, a lot of medical training can be really helpful in finding like acute things for people.
Yeah.
And also that you respect that when we're dealing with something that's like complex chronic
Oh
illness,
yeah.
it's really important to work with a professional who can
Oh
manage
yeah.
all of the things and all of that. So I am 100% and fully in support of people using it for like acute care, simple
Yeah.
things. Like definitely though, work with a professional if you've got complex chronic illness
Oh
like
my gosh.
or other autoimmune conditions or
Thyroid.
and
Yeah.
complex chronic stuff is important to work with a professional. So,
Yeah.
awesome.
I love that in all of y'all's feedback that y'all both shared. I feel like I just kept hearing freedom, freedom,
Yes.
independence, right?
Yep. Yeah.
That's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love
It
that.
allows people to advocate for themselves and be heard and validated and live their lives, like this is how this works in my life, and we talked about this a lot, and even still, like the whole like allergy and acid reducer thing, like those were hard for me to let her let go of.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
we talked about this like in our appointments, like in order for us to figure out and like listen to what the body is telling us and see the symptoms that we need to see, like we need to not be doing that. And even still all these years later, like that was hard for me
Yeah.
to do. This one's like I haven't been taking it for days.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Cool. Amelia, I'm curious what advice you have to offer to any kids that have been recently diagnosed with PANS.
Just to like be patient and know that like you don't really have a choice. Like your body's just taking over your brain. So it's just like you have to get like a treatment and just like be patient and wait for it to like help, and then eventually you'll start to feel better, and then it's a long journey, but it's all worth it. So
Yeah. Awesome.
What do you think their parents should know about what it's like to have PANS?
that we're not choosing to do anything, and that like anything like this. So, and that you will always love you guys. So
Yeah,
No.
that is important to know, right? Especially because when you're going through it, it's hard not to feel like we talked about earlier. It's hard to not feel like you're a bad kid or that there's something wrong with you. And you're absolutely right. There is nothing wrong with you. It's not your fault if this is happening.
Yeah.
Amelia, I think I could sit and listen to you talk all day long because and I hope you understand how important you are to all of us PANS moms and dads, because you're giving our children a voice. Even my daughter Avery, who was a little bit younger at onset, she doesn't remember anything. So part of it's very healing to me to listen to you talk about your experience, because I don't know what she felt. I don't know
Yeah.
what she thought. And even through homeopathy, I don't know what that felt like to her. And like you said, Ashley, it's it's coming into doing homeopathy ourselves. It's like, oh, okay, this is what it's like, but there's so many pieces of this that I have questions about. And you've said so many things today where I've been like, oh my gosh, that is what my daughter felt. That's what she
Yeah.
experienced. And I know that there's so many of us with spouses or family members who don't fully grasp what our kids are going through, and your words are like, I feel like they're straight from heaven, because they like hearing this out of your mouth is different than a mom saying it. And that's such an important thing. And the advocating that you're doing right now is so big. It's so big for me. It's so big for my children. It's big for the entire community. I just am so incredibly thankful that you're willing to share all of this. So as a mom, I have a question for you. What, and maybe it's more like, what did your mom do for you as parents? How do we support our children through this? What can we do? What did your mom do that helped you the most?
Well, like she always like would be like she'd always get like, especially like with like separation anxiety, like she'd always be like, why? And I was like, just be like, cause like I can't sleep without. So like she was just like got to a point where like she would just stop asking why and just like be there for me, because like I didn't know what was happening. So like I couldn't answer like her questions because I was just, my body just felt like I needed someone to be there. So like she just like got to the point where she just like, okay, I'll just like do it. And then like eventually I was able to like figure out like why and like why it was happening. So like just being there for them. And then like she was just like, do like, I would ask her to like just like stay with me in bed because like I couldn't go to sleep, and she would like just stay, and then we could like talk, and we'd like figure out, at like one point we would watch like videos like this like from the group and stuff, and that would help me sleep. So like we got to a point where she would come and then she'd be like, okay, we can watch the video. So we would watch a video and like that would help me. So like really just like figuring things out quickly that like could help me go to sleep and stop my panic attacks and stuff like that. So just really being there for me was what really helped. So
Just
And
being in
not
space
not
with
questioning, I think, is a big thing. Not questioning and just doing whatever needed to be done in that moment
Yeah.
to make it to the next moment, like just listening, and because she couldn't always tell me why. She would just, sometimes you just need your mama.
Well, what I'm hearing is not just the not questioning, I'm hearing accepting without judgment and not trying to control things, right? Like I'm hearing that you didn't necessarily say, we have to make this go away, we have to make this stop. That you were there and you were accepting. You're like, okay, you need me right now, so we're gonna do it. What do you think might help you?
Right.
And let's find it and let's work together. So, and so it's accepting, non-judgment, not trying to control, and also being there as like a partner in
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So there was lots of nights where we sat outside in the cold air
Mhm.
because that's what she needed. She used to run out the door in like when she was having a massive panic attack because she needed to be outside, which was a really great symptom to report, like during, she wanted to be outside. And so we would literally just sit outside and she would be like flapping and, like doing like all of her things that she would do, like when she was having her panic attacks. And I would just be sitting there rocking, like, just let me
waiting.
know when you're ready to go in. Like, are you ready to try to go to bed yet? Or we would listen to videos, or we did tapping, like we would do 4-7-8 breathing. She has an essential oils business. So she, at different times would have found different essential oils that helped at that time. There were different ones. So I think always just, trying to, I know this question was for her, but like, I mean, we really just tried. I'm not gonna lie and say I didn't yell and scream and cry sometimes, because
You're human.
yes. And so there definitely were a lot of ugly moments where I was not supportive and I was not non-judgmental. But I really always tried to be that and just do whatever she needed.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and like the reality is that every human, period, every parent, period, is going to have times when we lose it, right? Whether we're dealing with a PANS child or not. Every child is going to have a time when they lose it with their parents, whether they have PANS or not, right? And so it's about accepting that we're human and trying the best that we can to not judge ourselves for the times that we maybe don't act in our best abilities or best interest. And then coming back to repair. And then so that's what I'm hearing too, is that there was a lot of, you were able to find your way back to each other and come back to that place, even when it wasn't necessarily that you were connecting at your best with your best selves, bringing your best selves together.
For sure. And she laughs at me all the time because, even still, I'm like, I really shouldn't have said that. Like, it doesn't make sense. And if someone said that to me, you know, like, and she's like, Mom, let it go.
Yeah. You know, Amelia, I should have asked you this a little bit ago. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about the fact that your mom is using homeopathy too. Like if you felt like it helped you in your recovery and in your healing process at all, having your mom use homeopathy.
Don't really talk about it like homeopathy, like each other's like
Mhm.
journey that much. So like I don't really know as like much of like what she's going through, but like it's like nicer because like I feel like when she started, like I would like have an aggravation or like something like that, and she would be able to understand a little bit better and like have
Mhm.
not have to like question it as much.
Mhm.
So like I feel like that was like one of the big changes, but
Yeah.
And I do feel like, and this happens a lot in my line of work too, is like, um, you know, like Dr. Ross Green says, kids do well if and or when they can, right? So like if a kid is not behaving,
Mhm.
they're not choosing that. And like, so people, unfortunately, like our default is to assume that if a kid's being bad, they're making that choice. And it's not really the case. Their neurological system, their nervous system, like they're not regulated,
Mhm.
you know. And so I think that having that base understanding, and then also having on top of that the experience of myself going through homeopathy and an aggravation of like, I am completely out of control, like I can't help myself right now, I'm sitting here sobbing like I don't even know what, like I mean, I for zero reason, like there is no reason I should be behaving this way right now, and I could not help myself as an adult, you know. And I was like, bing, like light bulb, wow,
Yeah.
if me as an adult who is a pretty well educated, like has a pretty solid grasp on things, like I can't help myself, like my kid can't do that for sure, you know.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap here, I can't thank you guys enough for your continued advocacy that you do on behalf of the PANS and PANDAS community. And sharing your story is one of the biggest things that anybody can do to advocate. It's also the most vulnerable thing you can do because you're sharing a part of yourself with a whole bunch of strangers. So it's the most loving and giving and just thoughtful thing that you can do. So I appreciate your willingness to come and share and your vulnerability and sharing your experience, because I know that every single person that shares gets a better understanding of what PANS PANDAS is and a better understanding of how you can find your way to a better place in spite of PANS and PANDAS. So I'm curious, I want to give, we gave Amelia the opportunity to offer any advice to kids and to parents. Is there anything you would like to offer for advice? And then also for both of you, any final words of hope or anything that you'd like to share with our listeners?
So I would just say, and I say this to every parent, like, you know your kid best, period. I don't care what letters anyone has behind their name. I don't care what expertise they have. You are the expert in your kid. And if your mama gut or your daddy gut says that something's not right, follow that and don't let anyone silence it, because you're not wrong. And unfortunately, with this diagnosis, especially, like, it is something that you have to fight for still at this point. It's gotten so much better even since like we started this journey. But talk about it. Don't let people silence you. Don't let people tell you you're wrong. Don't let people tell you they know your kid better than you. And collaborate with your providers. And if you're not able to do that and ask questions and be part of treatment, that's not the right person for you. So that's what I would say is like, don't ever stop fighting for your kid and knowing that and trusting yourself. And it's really hard to do in this process because none of it makes sense. But you know your kid best. So follow that instinct because you do. And just listen to your kids, you know, and I think personally, something that helped in this thing with us is we talked about it a lot. I did not hide it from her at all. I never wanted her to feel like this was something that she was doing or a fault of hers. We went to like the Franklin Institute because we live near Philly, and we researched the brain and looked at the parts of the brain of like, where's the basal ganglia and what does that do and like what does it affect and what does it control. And so like knowledge is power, and that goes for your kids too. So I think having those open conversations and letting them ask questions and having those discussions empowers them. And that's important because being sick and having everything out of your control takes that power away from you. So that's a way to empower them again. So that would be my thing. What do you think? Final words?
That.
That.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your continued advocacy and the willingness to come and share, as I've already said. So, Ashley, we might have to ask you back to share your professional expertise with the community as well. So
I would love to chat.
all right. We'll talk offline and find a time to bring you back to share that what you have to share professionally as well. So thank you so much for joining us. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, ladies.
We hope you found this episode helpful, hopeful, and inspiring. We try to get a new episode out every week. You can make sure you don't miss any by following us on Spotify or subscribing to our channel on YouTube. If you want to connect with us more, join our Facebook group, Homeopathy for Pans and Pandas, where we have exclusive weekly videos and answer your questions about, you guessed it, homeopathy for pans and pandas throughout the week. If you are already a member, give us a shout out and let us know what you thought about this episode. If you aren't on Facebook and would like to reach us, you can email us at podcast@resiliencenaturopathic.com. Until next time, take care and remember, this won't be forever.